everybody. Thank you very much for making it.
Well, we've got so much.
Hello. Yeah, exactly. On this live Q&A panel with three of the greatest, because the other three couldn't make it. Mark Manning, Simon Woodcock, and Ryan Woolfenden, and of course my compadre, the magnificent David Mintz, who's sporting a little bit of a semi-beard there, in the way that you can be semi-pregnant.
I only want the moustache, but it comes with the rest of it at the moment. It's going to grow in. It'll grow in.
Yeah. Right.
I'm jealous. Thank you. I can't grow a full beard. I've bought it there. So, unfortunately, lockdown still means shaving for me.
Are you still waxing?
You're smooth, Ryan? Like an eel.
Welcome, gentlemen.
On Simon as well.
I wore this top especially for Whaley because last year when we were out there, I think with what you've got with Brexit and now you've got COVID-19, is that for every story there is one side that's coming out of it all right, and there was one that wasn't all right, and unfortunately I was on the wrong side that day.
Yeah, at least Liverpool aren't going to win the league, are they? So
how sad that one.
Gentlemen, we're here to talk about the.
What this hour is about.
Whatever.
No one can hear Whaley. I might have to mute him.
Please.
He'll love that.
Gentlemen, we're here to talk about the aftermath of the government plans for releasing us out of lockdown. There is a little bit of breaking news, and in as much as they've just announced now that they're extending that furlough scheme, aren't they, till, is it October, Ryan?
Yeah.
So what impact's that going to have on business owners? Is that just delaying the inevitable for some people?
Who's that to? Everyone.
That can be to Ryan.
I don't know. I think maybe it means that we're going to be in lockdown maybe a little bit longer. I don't know. I mean, obviously the Boris's announcement on Sunday says a phased approach, but I've seen Germany's figures are going back up in terms of their R rates as they start to release lockdown. So it looks like potentially we might be preparing for that. I think some employers will use it as a notice period to get rid of employers. You know, for those people that have got contracts that have got to give 4 months' notice. That I think I've already started to hear that's happening. Some of our tenants have experienced that. But I guess it means that we can take a bit of the financial pressure off businesses to make the best decision for health and well-being rather than for just money motivation, I guess.
And I suppose that also helps them to keep their unemployment figures down where they want them.
Yeah. You suggesting that the Tories are trying to manipulate figures there, David?
No, Ryan. I'm suggesting that every politician in the history of politics has used figures to carry their own agenda. But I think that in order to keep the market calm, you're going to need to keep unemployment at a manageable level anyway.
Have they actually announced the percentage yet? Because I was reading that they were looking at reducing the amount down from 80 to 60. I'm not sure if that was like a little, Karen on Facebook saying that, or that's a genuine thing.
I've not seen them play around with the percentage. You talk about the percentage of the wage that is subsidised.
Yeah. It said extended for months, but it says breaking news. But it's not really. There's not much to it at the moment. So I wonder whether
it's 60%. I thought it was 60%.
The rumour is that obviously until the end of June it will be as is, and then there's going to be flexibility whether they drop it to 60%. But I think the flexibility is also going to be on some allowing your staff to come back if you don't need them 5 days a week to come back 3 days, and then the government will subsidise the other 2 days, which would make sense.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think that's a great policy to do that. Yeah.
I mean, it would absolutely make sense, because I think from our point of view, when we look at it, and I think the first thing everybody was doing was looking at their off rates and everything else, which actually I think have really stood well. The real test will be when we come back, because if we do come back in July or June, whenever we come back, and all of a sudden companies start laying off staff, that's when you're going to see the bit. That's why the government are doing what they're doing now. They're trying to reduce that laying off of staff to try and keep the economy going.
So comments are coming in here, and Tom McGee's saying that they're keeping it 80%, but that from July, employers will have to contribute. Swiftly followed up with whatever that means. So, yeah, I guess they're going to alter that percentage then, aren't they?
Or make it compulsory that you have to pay the 20% extra, maybe. Or they might have the flexibility to say that, like Simon said, I think that's really, really good move if they do the flexibility of like, we'll contribute 60%, but you've got to pay the 40%, but then they can actually come back to work a little bit as well. Because I think most of us are not going to have the same volume of workload. And so we're not going to be able to bring everyone back at the same time, are we? So I don't think viewing numbers are going to be what they were pre-COVID straight away. I think we're going to have to build up to that again, aren't we? So.
Ultimately, what they're doing there is just a different sort of quantitative easing, isn't it? I mean, realistically, rather than, as you said, let them go turn unemployed, one of the things that, famously it did help in the last recession, giving that money out, but the banks actually kept hold of a large percentage of it. So, and a lot of economists actually said you'd have been far better off actually giving that back to the populace who could spend it. And that's what's going to happen with this, isn't it? Essentially, it's going to find its way back into the economy.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think do you remember when Australia went into recession some years ago, and the government actually gave everybody in Australia a certain amount of money, whether $1,200, but they had to spend it. So they were starting their own economy. And I think that within a reason, that's what they're trying to do. Whether it is successful,
haven't America done something similar as well? Aren't they supposed to give every American? I don't know if they put a compulsory spend on it, but I'm sure America said they were going to give every citizen a, $3,000 or $5,000 or something.
Oh, I thought it was just a cap with let's make America great again.
You're doing a great job. You're doing a great job.
And Mark, what about you? What about you in terms of what does that mean to a business like yours? Was it 19, 20 offices around Yorkshire?
Yeah, so we've got about 80% of our team currently out on furlough. We've slowly started bringing a few back out of furlough just to support some of the increase in inquiries. I think this is a really interesting piece of news that's come out today about the potential to continue to claim under the furlough scheme. There is a thought in our minds that we're going to see a really, really significant surge in activity as we come back after the lockdown phase has ended. Whenever that might be. I mean, best prediction is, by the looks of things, 1st of June, something like that we're back in our offices, but I reckon we'll be probably there a bit before, trying to line things up. We know we're going to have this surge in activity. That surge in activity is going to have to be managed by quite a significant number of people, otherwise we're going to lose opportunities. But then what happens after the surge? There could be a bit of a lull, and if the furlough scheme is being extended, who's to say that if that lull does come, that we can't look to put people back into furlough, having dealt with that initial surge that will come from the doors opening, and sort of go from there, really. So there is a lot of different options that this provides. And apart from anything, it just gives us the other opportunity to just hang on to our people that bit longer. Nobody wants to have to, look at rationalizing their team or anything of that sort if they can avoid it. So the longer we can leave people in furlough, in my view, the better. But it does raise some other questions as well, which maybe we'll come on to later. So, people staying in furlough for significant periods of time, might forget how to do the job. How do we keep those people engaged? All those types of questions that will come from that, really.
We probably need to start with those questions now, because that was literally all we had, really, that one question. So you'll be surprised by that level of preparation for me and David.
I won't. Everybody else has been studying for the last 2 days, and you just come out with one question.
Discuss for an hour.
I think the key thing for any business at the moment, all these schemes, and everything that could and would happen. It's a very fluid situation. I think to try and speculate is somewhat pointless at the moment. I think we just have to be prepared and organise ourselves. And I think one of the things we could talk about is what are our core objectives as we come out of this as businesses? What do we see? I know Simon's going to have some objectives because he thinks like I do, unfortunately, which is why we don't get on very well. But you know, I know for our business, we're really trying to nail down exactly what are our objectives as we come out of this. What is it we're hoping to achieve?
Can you share that with us without giving your competitors the edge? Give us a broad brushstroke of what you're thinking.
Watching this, so be careful, Mark.
Wow, Ian's got much better things to do than watch this rubbish. So look, for us, we've got three really clear objectives. They're not complicated, so I don't think it's that's difficult to share them. Number one, ensure the safety and well-being of our team and customers as well. That's number one. Number two, maintain our network, our services, and our reputation. And number three, be prepared for the sprint out of the blocks. In the next 3 to 4 weeks, next month or so, those are our business's three objectives as it currently stands, and everything we do will be linked back to those.
I would add just one more, Mark. I would add one more to that, which was the one that we initially, which was almost phase one when we went into lockdown, which was protect the pipeline, and make sure that you're working on everything you can with that. So,
can I ask you, have you guys been surprised by how most people have been surprised? It seems of how robust that pipeline has held together. Are you still finding that, or are you surprised?
Not by robust, you mean they've not actually withdrawn yet? I just think we're still important, aren't we? I think that's the thing. The crucial thing, I think, is once we come out of lockdown, are people going to want to renegotiate? Are people going to withdraw completely, or are people happy to proceed? And I think everyone's just sitting on the fence, aren't they? So I'm not surprised that people are taking that approach, because it's such a drawn out process.
We're not really going to know yet.
Well, no, we don't know yet, do we?
Yeah, I don't do know.
So.
We were expecting within our budgets, we were looking at July, August, September being the real crux of when you're going to know. With the furloughing now until October, it's just going to put more and more people waiting to know where they are in their jobs and their security. But saying that, when we run it at the moment, and I speak to a solicitor a couple of days ago about the newer cases that they received up until the end of March when we went into lockdown. And all I asked was, of all of them new cases, which were in theory, they weren't pot committed, they hadn't spent a lot of money, they hadn't had surveys done or anything else, how many of them have withdrawn? And the answer was hardly any. Hardly any. So I think that it's going to be different to which area of the country you're in, who's your biggest employer in that area. Because if you're in an area that is employing, you've got a massive company where you work and they employ a massive part of the workforce there, and they decide they're going to lay off, then what you're going to have is, you're going to have a higher off rate. But for our area where we are, down in Southeast, it's not. We've seen it very low. And I've changed the way that we also measure off rate. I don't just measure it in a percentage of returns. I'm now looking at it as in the pound note value, because it's your pipelines that you're protecting is your cash flow. And that's going to be fundamentally so important for us when we come out.
So I think
just on this subject on this subject of pipelines, we did a totally agree with Simon. I think our clear objectives as we came into this phase was number one was protecting the pipeline and making sure that we could do whatever we could with that. We did a full exercise on the classification of pipeline, as I'm sure most businesses have, and we were amazed by the amount of people that were still wanting to try and push deals through, even in the months that we faced lockdown. And I'm sure most agency businesses have found that over the last couple of months that the resilience of buyers and sellers has been really quite a surprise and quite a pleasant surprise really for us all who are probably predicting very little income. But what we've also managed to figure out within our pipeline is that there is quite a significant percentage of it. So for us, 16% of our pipeline, which is totally on hold at the moment. So I would say those are people that have just said, look, I'm not doing anything until we come out of lockdown. So arguably, that's 16% of our pipeline that if the news isn't that good at the other end, or people don't have the confidence at the other end, could fall away as we come out of the other phase of the other end of lockdown. We're hopeful that won't happen, but we have to prepare that it could. And
What's
that's
your
how
average
our
offer rate,
business
Mark?
is. Say again, sorry?
What's your average offer rate, though? 16% doesn't seem that much to me. I mean, if you've 16% abortive rate, I think most agencies would be happy with that, wouldn't they?
That's 16% though of the entire pipeline, not 16% of sort of monthly sales agreed in that month. It depends how you measure fall through. I'm talking as a percentage of the entire pipeline now, because that's really what we're interested in. That's where the value sits within the business. But I would normally expect a fall through rate of about 18% to 20% across our business month on month. But this is a slightly different measure because it's the whole pipeline rather than just against gross sales achieved in that month.
Yeah, you're right, Mark. I'll tell you what, though, the funny thing is, Mark, we're starting to analyse our business differently now. So, I mean, for us, we're measuring so much more now in value terms rather than just unit terms. So when you do your normal off rates, it's, well, we've done that many sales, we've done that many returns, boom, there's your off rate. As now, I looked at ours, and let's just say the off rate on the pipeline was 3.45%. In value terms, we lost 3.2. So it was nowhere near as devastating as what we had actually initially planned out for in our budgets.
Yeah.
Simon, I thought when you were going to say, when you were talking about your reassessing things, we were talking the other day though, and you were saying one of the things that has become absolutely now vital is you're looking at obviously social media measurements, aren't you, and all that aspect. Whereas they've been on the periphery of many businesses there, you're talking about likes, followers, views, all of that absolutely essential now, aren't you, rather than just being a kind of nice to have or a distraction.
It was one. I'm in my office. I'm actually looking at my management plan, my 1 year business plan of things we're going to do this year. And on it was about social media and how we're going to interact with it a lot more and create more value. So what we've done is we've got all the systems processes that we all do in our day to day. And during lockdown, what we've done is we have the three, and I do it every year. What are the things we must stop doing? What are the things we need to start doing, and what are the things we really need to improve upon? And social media was the one for this year that was in our let's get that done. So it's been brilliant for us because we're all on Zoom calls. All my managers have done videos for their local community. And the funny thing is we're not mentioning us as a name or a company or anything else. It's just about giving out information. But what we have realised is we now need about 28 hours in every day when we come back. Just
in terms of that, we've spoken about the reimagining of what, many people are talking about restructuring the business in there. What do we think is going to be changing permanently? What facets of what we're doing now? You've spoken about Zoom, obviously there. Many people talking about, doing a digital launch before going to a formal appraisal or anything else like that. Can I get your thoughts on what you think has just been done because we're locked down and what we think is actually going to change permanently?
Who's picking that one up? Who do you want?
And you can all shout at once. You can start because you're talking.
Okay. So I'm probably the sort of slight skeptic in the room, really. I think short, medium term, I think we need to embrace some of these tech pieces in terms of, virtual viewing presentations and all that type of thing, make sure that we can offer our clients that facility. But in the course of time, personally, I genuinely think things will probably just return almost back in terms of that process to the way that things were. Because for us, what's the most important thing from a seller's point of view? Getting foot traffic through the door. What do we not want to do? Put inhibitors in the way of that happening. And I think really, really good virtual viewings do exactly that. I'm not saying they won't become a feature of what we'll offer to clients. I just think that, if you had the option of, look, should we do a virtual viewing or should we actually get someone physically through the door? I know where I'm going to be at. And I also know where I'm going to be at in terms of our valuers in the course of time, what I want them doing. I don't want them spending time in the offices trying to assess what's good and bad. I want them out meeting customers because that's what we have to do. But of course, always doing that, keeping that number one objective in mind around protecting their safety and their well-being. And that's the really, really important part of this. Where I do think we'll see some significant changes is I think in the world of lettings, I think we can seriously streamline the process that exists within lettings, because there is an abundance of tenants that exist for too few properties. And I think in the world of financial services, mortgage appointments particularly, so much of that can be done over the telephone. Our business was already moving in that direction anyway, and we're really going to be looking to try and ramp up the use of technology within our mortgage service business, and ensuring that we can really take advantage, because that does create a lot of efficiency, whereas I don't think virtual viewings and virtual valuations do create efficiency. I think they create more work.
Mark, just on the virtual viewings thing, there's been some debate online as regards what kind of virtual viewings you go with, whether that be a really good sort of video tour which sort of flows through the house, or the more sort of Matterport style of virtual viewing. Do you guys have a preference? Do you use a mix? What do you prefer?
Well, through lockdown, we've been just filming basic video tours that our sellers have been doing, and they've been really successful. And I've really enjoyed kind of like the honesty that some of those have got. I really love the Matterport tours. I think they're really insightful. But again, whatever we do, I think we have to make sure we do with one eye on the idea that we've got to have people still going through the door of those properties physically in the course of time, because if that starts to slow down, we're going to get upset sellers who are going to have reasons to think about leaving us, and ultimately that's what genuinely we're judged on. We're judged on the volume of people that go through the door of those homes. That's what every single seller wants to talk to you about.
That's always been the acid test, hasn't it? So
Mark, oh, sorry, I was going to say, Mark, I don't think you're the only skeptic in the room, because I tend to agree with most of the things you're saying. The only thing I do think will be slightly different will be at the stage of comparable evidence, because I think video does give you a much richer comparable evidence for homeowners than just a set of details or a few properties on Rightmove. But apart from that, I don't, because we're a people industry. We're all about communication, and we have to communicate with each other. I saw somebody yesterday on certain things in IT. You can do that from far away, but when you're sitting with people or you're dealing with people in their biggest assets, they really do want to see the whites of your eyes. They want to know that they can trust you. And that is still difficult to do just over video.
I again agree with what both of you said. I think the level of commitment for lettings is so much lower that you can do the virtual tours and get commitment from that. And, you know, me and Whaley have spoken before about Video Ask, how that's worked really well for us, Matterport. But with selling, the level of commitment is much higher. They will want to view. I do question, though, whether the volume of viewers is the most, of paramount importance to sellers. Would they prefer 10 people going through their house, or would they prefer 2 qualified? I think that depends on maybe on the client base and the conversations you have with clients. I think certainly short to medium term, they might prefer fewer qualified, especially if, the reports we're seeing about cleaning their properties before and not being able to have open days. So I think short to medium term, that might change, and then that might just continue organically through, because that's what people's expectation is then. But prior to lockdown, we've always loved the launch days. I love them. Get 10 people through the door in an hour, create that competitive tension. I think it's a fantastic way to sell. But I think that's the bit that probably change. But it might, as Mark said, just be short to medium term.
Do you see the virtual viewing as a tool to sort of refine the get down from the time wasters to the people that are absolutely serious in seeing the house?
I've always said no, because I think there's a lot of an emotional connection. I think when you walk through the door, that there's a disconnect by using a virtual tour. Now, Matterport is clearly great, but I do think there's an emotional connection sometimes. You walk through the door, but there's all those cliche examples, the first 7 seconds of walking through the hallway, all that type of stuff, and I do think you lose that with a virtual one. And obviously our business is about meeting people and building relationships, and that's harder to do if everyone's doing virtual tour than face to face. But I definitely think short to medium term, that is the adaptation we need to make.
Can I just say, you picked up an interesting point there. You said the word time waster, and I think we use that word probably a little bit too much across our industry. I'm always minded of what our director of financial services says. He's got a great theory on this, that he would rather our mortgage advisor sits down in front of somebody who hasn't got a job, who hasn't got anywhere to live, or anything like that, and sees them for a mortgage appointment, because in 6 months to a year to 2 years time, you don't know what that person's situation may be. So a time waster today doesn't necessarily equate to somebody in 6 months, a year's time who's still, and in the end, if these people have a desire to move or view property, that would suggest that there could be a customer for the future. So I think, as one of the comments was coming around at the bottom there, this is a business that's geared on communication, and the more people you communicate with effectively, I think the more important from our point of view. And I think that's how I would see this process moving forward. I don't think it's going to change fundamentally. I think you're absolutely right, Ryan. I think short to medium term, there will be some things we have to do to just try and deal with the present issue around this epidemic and what's going on.
I think also, is there a way to service those clients that we can't transact with initially in a more efficient way? If you're looking at your negotiators, what their strike rate is in terms of viewings, is there a more efficient way that you can still offer a great service without physically having to go out and do a viewing with them? But I completely subscribe to what you're saying. There's no such thing as a time waster. It's long-term business, relationship-based, and I think that we should treat everyone as best we can and offer the best service we can. But I do wonder whether we can have different sort of filters for hot proceedable buyers and those that aren't, but still offer a great service to both sets. But that's the challenge, isn't it?
We'd be allowed to do that. A lot of it, though, about whether we're using video tool and everything else, there's a lot until we really back in the game and we know the amount of clientele that we're dealing with. It's going to be more measurable then, because for me, I look at it and go, I agree with what you're saying, Mark. There's no such thing as a time waste, just the wrong moment in time to be dealing with somebody. But if you look at it, it's an educational piece for some homeowners that are going to be busy. They might not want 20 people through their front door, but as long as they're being well educated on the fact that, your virtual viewing or your video tool, whatever it else is designed there to help them and reduce their wants, so they're only getting those 2 or 3, that will work for that client. And I think that, in this industry, we all tend to try and have that way of doing business is the right way. But, you've got amazing agents throughout the country, and they're all doing it differently to whatever their wants, needs, and their clientele that they're dealing with.
Yeah, collaboration, isn't it, with the client anyway.
Mark, you still look like you're about to go into doing like some takeoffs or landings.
Yeah,
how is their traffic control?
Today we are all clear. Simon, this is what people on the front lines of business look like, just so you know.
David, can you get that comment up from Sharon on there? Because again, I just want to have a look at that. And that's the one she mentioned, whilst the tech has been ace, but I do think it's really reminded agents that above all else, communication is key. So pick up the phone, which I think that is a great obvious statement there. The services that you were alluding to there, Simon, in terms of those virtual comparables, digital comparables. Mm-hmm. Are you talking about systems like Akaboom there? And I suppose asking each of you, which are the tools that have been key partners for you in this lockdown process?
Akaboom is for us. It's been really good, really good. We'd certainly be using videos of properties rather than just standard comparable evidence in there. But then we use Akaboom probably differently to some agents. So not only have we when we went into lockdown, we obviously updated our full database. So everything that we valued, we put back onto Akaboom. So we were keeping them updated. But we also use it for applicants that are in our area that have got a property to sell. So we know the type of property they've got to sell. So we're going to start sending them that kind of information to say, look, this is similar to yours. This is the sort of prices they're going for. And then it opens up to conversation. And the other area we use Akaboom in is for dealing with offers, to show owners and the buyers that where the comparable evidence is. It amazes me in our industry that I think one of the worst terms I hear is the owner wants, the vendor wants, where it is literally this is our comparable evidence why you should be buying it for that price, because that's what it's worth in the market. So Ackerboom's really helped there. And the other big one for us is Spectre, which are doing some great things for us. So it's, it's still about us, but we've now got the information behind us from an IT point of view.
I think that's really interesting about Spectre, because obviously a number of people have made the point that it was very hard to think about how you could use that particular product in a market like this. But you've been finding a way, yeah?
Well, before this meeting, I actually had a training session at 10:30 this morning with Spectre, because they've got their new MI in the background, which is, it's not what we can use now, but it's training all the team on what we can be using the moment we come back. And that's the most important thing.
We'll come back to that. I'd like to just get that view of which partners have been important to Mark and Ryan there. But also, I just want to come back after that with the next question. The follow-up is really just for all of your furloughed staff, have you been giving them training and development exercise to get on with? But I'll leave that one there for you to think about, Simon. Mark, who have been important partners for you in this process?
Honestly,
I was going to say Waitrose.
We've genuinely relied on so much of what we do in house. We've cut back on so many of our external services, the things that we might have done previously. So we're really not using a lot of external suppliers. The only ones that we're still engaged with and really working hard with, probably like software providers, and also people like Christian at Van Milder and the team there, who I think have done really good job through this process. But yeah, we're not doing a huge amount of other stuff, but then we do have a lot of this stuff in house. So that's probably fair to say,
isn't it? You're changing that approach because you haven't felt that really you can find this stuff outsourced. So you've taken the decision to actually build it yourself.
Yeah, a lot of like the web solutions and the social media stuff that Sai's talking about, we do and manage all of that in house now. So it's not really something that we sort of rely on externally for. I'm not a great. I've had this on our podcast previously. I'm not a great believer on add-ons unless they are absolutely essential to the running of the business.
I prefer to call them strap-ons, but we'll go with that. Ryan, what about you?
Like Simon, Ackerboom's been great. I've been having lots of demos and new stuff actually as well, trying to look at what when we come out of this, what can we utilize. I mean, I'm a massive tech fan, but it is a bit shiny object syndrome sometimes, and I'm trying to take Peter Knight's advice on what's a wow and what's a whim, and work on the essentials first and then the nice to haves, and then focus on the cherry on top. But I mean, our website, Alex Evans, has been great. We've done a few extra bits with him in terms of the review. I mentioned about our better off calculator and a few other bits and bobs like that. So I think, to be fair, all the suppliers have been really helpful. I think we're all going through the shit together, aren't we? So it's been nice.
Apart from the one we all know about, have you? I think you just mentioned there. It does seem to me that suppliers, marshalled so ably by your friendly kerfuffler, they have been particularly forthcoming and proactive, haven't they? It strikes me. I don't remember in the last recession, for example, people like Kev Ellis at Land and New Homes, Spectre, Ackerboom, all these great companies. They weren't coming forward as quickly as they have done in this one.
Yes, it's difficult because depending on whether your take on it, you could say it's cynical in as much as that it either gets cancelled or they do something more to add value.
You cynic.
I've got a great relationship with most of our suppliers prior, and I think that they've always been helpful. That's why we stick with them, and it's a partnership, isn't it? I don't think people like Susanna, Amy, all the people that we use with, I don't think that I think they're always going above and beyond, to be honest, not just during lockdown. And that's why we continue to have a great relationship with them.
Interesting. You only named the female suppliers in the industry there, Ryan. But I'll leave that for you to explain to your wife.
You mentioned Kevin as well, and Kevin's been really helpful. Sent me a few bits and bobs over. Obviously, Peter, Stephen Brown. There you go. I've married it up. Hopefully, now we've got equality.
You play both sides, is what you're saying.
That's our secret.
So, Ryan, if I can just jump in, because yesterday, Ryan, you had this lovely little video with you stood against that really funky blackboard thing that you've got in your office there, and your message was people before profits, and of course we all ran out.
You brought that, David. I saw her as well.
We ripped off your video. All of us did, because we take our lead from you. But I mean, at the core of that, you would not have had to release that message yesterday, and I wouldn't have had to rip off your video had we not been inundated with calls from members of the public that morning, assuming that estate agents are now going to be able to go back to business as normal. Now, I've been positively surprised by the vast number of comments on all of the industry press websites this morning, from agents that are basically saying, look, guys, just wait. There'll be time for us all to get back, but now is not the time. But there are a few that are breaking out and choosing to open offices again, aren't there?
Yeah, they are. And interestingly, I just had an email from Vuber saying they're available to do viewings should we wish. So that was an interesting take on it. So, yeah, look, there's always going to be people. And to be fair, like, everyone can interpret things how they want to interpret it, and people that run their own businesses have got to make decisions that they feel is best for their business. So I personally could see, if you were doing social distancing, that perhaps viewing empty properties isn't such a bad thing. We had a chat with our team. Our team said no, they don't think that's the right course of action to take, and so collectively we decided as a team that we're not going to do viewings because that is the current guidance. But, people are going to interpret it differently. I know some good agents that I have a lot of respect for, that I think are really nice people that are doing viewings. So I don't think it makes you just a money grabber or anything else like that. If you're under pressure from your clients to do viewings, I can see why a lot of people want to do those viewings. So,
But at its core, it's irresponsible to give way to that pressure, isn't it?
Yeah, that's my belief. It doesn't make it me right and them wrong. But yeah, I think you've got to, say what
we
you do.
We all know the price that you put on a listing, but what price do you put on life?
£5.
Again, it's more than toys.
It's Whaley very little.
Yeah, but again, that probably depends on your interpretation of how bad the virus is, isn't it? There's some people that think that they're not that bad, and it only affects over 85 people and everything else. So again, I just think you don't have to slag each other off. We've made our statement on what we're doing. If other agents want to take a different stance, that's up to them. But I'm not going to worry too much about what other agents are doing, to be honest with you.
Simon, what's your view?
I think that the challenge that you've got is with the government's language. As humans, we all interpret it how we want to interpret it for our business. So for us, we're not doing any viewings. I think it's also down to a bit like what Ryan was getting at, which is we wouldn't do it and we don't want to do it, and we would tell every agent not to do it. But that's not our right. It's if you're an individual, small, independent company where you are viewing it and trying to justify that you need to do the viewings for your cash flow or to keep staff in business, you're going to go and do that. For us, when you get to a slightly larger size, the human life is number one. Let's get that straight. But you have to start thinking about brand. And for us, it just doesn't sit with our brand to be out going against government guidelines and doing viewings.
Simon, Peter Knight always talks about Disney, doesn't he, and how their number one remit is the safety of its punters essentially there, and that's what we're talking about here, isn't it? Is when you get to that point there, that's what you can rely on, and we simply won't take your life in our hands.
Well, I think if let's look at it and just say, for instance, I think that within the industry, we're all. Now, on Sunday, we were all sitting there with bated breath going, can we come back next week? We're now all going, it's the 1st of June. So we've already been 2 months without any agency. Another 3 weeks, excuse the pun, is not going to be life or death. No. So you might as well just not get involved and wait until we can.
I do think it's very logical, though, isn't it? Some of the stuff. I mean, that's what I struggle with personally, without going down a sort of political path. I mean, you know, I can't go and visit my dad in his garden, but I can sit in a park 2 meters away from a stranger. You know what I mean? And I just think that is how you get agents that will rationalise it, because they'll think, well, hang on, I can go and sunbathe. You know, we're obviously by the beach. I can go and sunbathe now, as long as I'm 2 meters away. But I can't stay 2 meters away from my dad in his garden. So, and he's all, you know, so I get the illogical side of stuff. And you know, look, it's easy to judge people when you're, you know, comfortable, and we're only a very small agency. But you know, perhaps if my back was against the wall financially, maybe I would be looking reasons to justify it. I hope I wouldn't, and I hope I, you know, like I preached in the video, you know, we say people before profit, and I mean that. But sometimes it's easier to say it when you're not, you know, struggling, isn't it?
I mean, ultimately, Ryan, and by the way, you never say small, you're boutique. So that's how you respin that.
Sorry,
Napoleon.
does that go for body parts as well? Can I use that for body parts?
It does. Napoleon, as usual, is not holding his punches back on there, saying it's obviously irresponsible and reckless and should be reported. Any agents breaching the rules should be named and shamed.
I'm not with it. You know, we've had a joke about this, Whaley and David, with an agent, haven't we? But I just think that's unprofessional. You know, look, if people can make their own decisions, people in the local community can decide what they think's right or wrong. I just think.
And you'll just shop them in just to make that happen, yeah?
I'll just create a fake Facebook account and spread all the information. That's, you know.
but isn't that the whole point? Isn't this the outrage of the address that we had on Sunday night and all the follow-up information we've had since then? The government is relying too heavily on businesses and also members of the public to interpret the very vague guidelines they've set down. The ridiculous rules, because you're right, I'm allowed to be in contact with one other person, so I have to choose effectively the least infected person I know, and invite them round. I mean, we all know we're going to choose the most attractive person we know, and sometimes, as I've learned to my own detriment, the most infected person and the most attractive person are often one and the same thing. But the issue here is that it's open to our interpretation as members of the public, and Napoleon can say as much as he wants that we should follow the regulation and guidelines. But the point is, there are no guidelines that have been clearly issued to our industry.
No,
I don't know if I agree. I don't know if I agree with that. I think.
Mark, are you from the camp then that says, look, they're actually pretty explicit in terms of if you just follow that common sense rule, they are there to be understood quite clearly.
I think on the way into lockdown, it was made very, very clear to us that we are a non-essential retail business. And the government have made it pretty clear, if you read the guidelines, that non-essential retail businesses are still to remain exactly where they were. We're not to be opening our doors. And it's as simple as that. I mean, I think, you know, we will all have found through lockdown that we've had to make exceptions. There'll be essential moves that have had to take place, particularly on the letting side of things. There'll be key transfers that have had to take place on completions and exchanges or completions that have happened. You know, and people have had to use some common sense to an extent to sort of work their way around those things. But the guidance is pretty clear. I think what is inevitably going to happen is that as Property Mark and whoever else come out with the clearing up and exactly what's expected of us and the times involved in it, as we run to whatever that first day back is, let's say it is the 1st of June, that week prior and possibly even a few days earlier than that are going to be pretty pretty open to interpretation. I think there'll be plenty who say, you know what, yeah, we're back on the 1st of June, but for the sake of a few days, let's just crack on and do whatever we need to do. And I think that's probably what will happen with this, but I think that's sort of almost expected, really. And I'm not sure there's very much we can do around that. But we'll see. We are a non-essential retail business, and that's what's been said the whole way through this. So we have to treat ourselves as such.
So, Mark,
I don't think it's logical, and I think that's personally what I struggle with. The lack of logic applied to what the guidelines are. And I was speaking to Stephen Brown about it actually, and he had a case where an agent was doing viewings. Another agent reported him. I think it's up by your neck of the woods, actually, David. Other agents reported him to his local MP. MP referred him to the council, got a letter back to say, no, you're fine to continue doing it. They're just guidelines. So I think that's why it's, I don't get on my high horse about everyone else, because, you just control the controllables. You can decide what you do and crack on with it.
I do think, though, that it is pretty clear about viewings, that we should not be doing viewings unless it is for key workers, etc. So that's pretty clear. But I think that as an industry, we've got an opportunity, because let's be fair, it's not showered with it. It's not all amazing, the reputation we have as agents, as an industry in whole. And the last thing we need is people going off in all different directions and making it even worse for us, because that we will get there. From where I see it, I believe that we've already had the press phoning us and really pushing us. They wouldn't give us any details and names. Are you doing viewings? Can I view a house? Can I view a house? And but no, you can't. But we don't need these sorts of stories out there. I think it's just bad for the whole industry, for any of them agents that are doing it. That's just my view.
And is this not just an example again of why we as an industry need a singular voice in terms of somebody that's going to give clear guidance? Some of us are Property Mart members. Some of us will be guild members. Some of us won't be members of any of that. But if there ever was a time for somebody to step into the breach, surely the past few weeks have been the time for somebody to step forward and really sort of claim this industry as their own and to give us some guidance we can all follow.
You should do it, David. Go on. I'll support you.
I look for glory.
I have long since backed Whaley on this, but honestly, if I think you've got a loud enough voice, and even I'll tell you something, if Property Mart, I'm not a Property Mart member anymore, but if Property Mart came out with guidelines today that stated this is what you can do for viewings, this is what you can't do for viewings, this is when you can bring your staff back in, this is how your offices are going to look, this is the PPE you're going to need, anything like that, I would say, look, that's Property Mart. They obviously know what they're doing. And I would probably take my lead from an organisation like that, whether I was a member or not. Why are we not hearing from them sooner?
Absolutely agree, David. Absolutely agree. And I think they are pushing and they're lobbying. I don't think they're making enough of it, of what they're doing for the industry as a whole. But they are doing stuff in the background.
It's a communication thing then, Simon. Yeah, that's exactly what John Paul said.
One thing that we have to do, it is our only job, is to communicate.
Yeah.
To be fair to them, they can, they've got to, like everybody else, they've got to take the guidance that's been issued. They've got to review that guidance. Clearly, the government have put it all together the way that they have, and it's all been, sort of general, this is what we're doing. And then each industry's got to come up with its own specific guidelines that it believes is appropriate to the situation. I think if they didn't manage to produce something by the end of this week, I think we would all feel quite disappointed that hasn't come out. But personally, I think I'm pretty clear on what our business is meant to be doing. And I think as long as something's out by the end of this week, which is a key thing, then I think we can be pretty satisfied that we know then where we're going. This is the same thing as it's been with our industry, is the same and always has been. There are agents out there who will charge absolutely nothing to sell your house, 0.5%, and there are agents out there who will charge you proper fees, 1.5% to 2%. And the way that people interpret their position on that fee scale is probably very similar to the way that people will come out of this lockdown. The really good agents who charge proper fees will come out of it reputation intact and doing the right things, and the agents that charge a pittance will probably go and do what they always do and just try and take advantage and cut corners and do the things that we know that that make them what they are. I don't think this is any different.
There is a real risk of reputational damage, isn't there, in terms of if you come back too quickly and you seem to be doing viewings, if the public are in that area are not particularly pro coming out of lockdown early, then they will galvanize very quickly on social media and you'll be shut down pretty much.
Vigilante justice.
Yeah, I mean, Peter Knight can say what he wants about Disney putting the life of its visitors at the parks above all else. But let's face it, nothing is bad for business at a theme park like a body floating in Desktop Mountain. So there are very practical reasons. I mean, it's not a pretty sight seeing 4 kids crying, going, why is Mommy not coming back? So, there are very practical reasons in terms of reputational damage why we should be putting the lives of our customers first and foremost. But, on a selfish level, that's because it's going to shut our business down, isn't it?
What's happened to Mickey Mouse's head?
Why is Mickey bleeding?
In my mind, I've now got Small World playing around in my head.
Gents, could I ask you? This wouldn't be the Kerfuffle broadcast without us having a shameless point scoring exercise. I want to ask you 3 questions, and I want you to score them out of 10, please, each. And we'll start with Mark because he's sat next to me. How would you score the government's response? And I'm going to talk about this up to the lockdown, then during the lockdown process, and then I'm going to ask, and this one's an easy one, and then how would you rate the public's response to the whole crisis and how we ourselves have acted? Okay, Mark? Out of 10, please.
I think it's an awful situation, but I genuinely think that everybody has done everything the best that they can. I don't think...
Tory!
Okay. I think the government, I'd probably score a 7.
Okay.
I think after lockdown, I agree. I wasn't particularly impressed with Boris's speech, and I think the notes should have been available pretty quickly afterwards and the guidance following. So I think I'd go with a 6 on that one. I don't think they definitely didn't handle that bit on Sunday very well. And obviously public,
sorry, just on that bit, the best I heard about his speech on Sunday was someone said it was like listening to the clues they used to give in 3, 2, 1 to win Dusty Bin.
It was very vague, but then I suppose that is sort of the way it's trying to be, isn't it? Really, I think all of this has been. I think to think it's anything other than a plan that's been well orchestrated and put together is probably a bit naive. I think everybody knows exactly. I think they know exactly what they're doing. There's a reason why McDonald's had beautifully printed signs outside their restaurants the day after closing was announced. It's because they knew full well what was going on and been given the tip off. So I think it's all it's been done in a certain way. As far as the public go, I don't think you can fault. Everybody's been amazing. I've actually really liked parts of lockdown. I think it's been really refreshing.
You've had people fighting over toilet paper. Come on, we're scum. We should be 1 or 2 out of 10.
We've heard enough for the
hand wipes. Hand wipes.
Oh. We've heard enough from the Conservative.
Sorry, wet wipes. I said wet wipes.
Yeah. Mute him, David.
I'm going to mute him. Simon, if we could ask you to score on the same basis, please.
Right, so it was before lockdown. I'm an 11. No, I'm I would say about a 7. I think during lockdown and where we are to now, I think there'd be certain areas that you'd give them a 10, and there's certain areas that you'd give them a 0. So for the furlough scheme and everything else that they've done and let's be fair, within a week of us being in lockdown, you've got to give them a 10 for that. Where we're at now, probably a 5, because the thing is I know that they're trying to do everything we can, and I'm trying to use the best analogy, which is if we use the sat nav, we punch in where we want to go. But what is happening is this sat nav is keeping updating and changing our route all the time with more information that it's getting. So your best laid plans are always going to need to be changed. And I think most business owners are using the term fluid more than they've ever used it, because all of our plans are fluid. So I'd give them a 5 for now. And what was the third question?
The public, how the public have reacted to the whole thing.
Okay, I'll answer this in 2 parts. I think around 50% of the public have been a 9 or 10, which are the ones that have actually, you know, what you'd class as your more light law-abiding, staying in. I mean, I've literally been into my office twice in 8 weeks, and the other 50%, 0.
Okay, so just to be clear, okay, what was that? How did you rate the Brexiteers? It was what, 0? Okay, and I'm coming over now to Comrade Woolfenden. Comrade Woolfenden, can we get your scores, please?
Oh, you know my feelings on the government. I think the problem is it's not just when lockdown; it's all the stuff that happened years before, isn't it? So I think, unfortunately, they were massively handicapped for years of, in my opinion, shit policy making and everything else. So you know, I actually, I'm trying to be generous, really, but I mean, you just look at Japan and Germany and the testing policy and everything. And you know, I'm not a virologist, I'm not an expert, but I just. Yeah, and I got to laugh about the great thing about the furloughing scheme. Can you imagine? Can you just imagine if Corbyn had been dishing this out? Can you? Oh, man. You know, it's just like the hypocrisy of no.
Mute him.
Me last because I'm just going to waffle on for 30 minutes about how much.
I'll tell you what. I think Brian is catnip to Whaley.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here.
I thought there was. It's very few things worse than discussing politics with Whaley, as it turns out now. There is discussing politics with Ryan. Who knew?
Yeah, I'm sending Ryan a couple of well dones on the private chat. Well done. That's what you're here for, my friend.
In his defence on the vagueness of his speech, he had 30 minutes to announce something, so clearly he had to be vague. So I'll give him a bit of defence of that. But it was pre-recorded. I mean, surely someone watched it and thought, this is a bit shit. Did they not? I don't know. But I understand that he cannot cover every aspect of every different industry in a little presser. But I'm alert now, so you know I cross the road if I see coronavirus towards me.
You look alert there. You were relaxing. The virus has got you. Okay, guys, I think that's absolutely fantastic. David, have you got any closing questions for them?
Any closing question? Mark Manning, if Corbyn was in power, how quickly would he shut the synagogues in the first week?
He's not anti-Semitic, all right? I don't know where you've heard that from. It's all a lie.
I'm actually going to ask you all a very good question. You're only allowed to choose one person each, okay? And it can't be Uncle Tom or whatever his name is, Captain Tom, all right? I want you to choose one
Whaley.
COVID hero. Who to you, and it could be somebody in your community.
Barry.
Who in your community or area or industry, who has been the hero for you?
It's easy for me, that one.
Go on.
She's called Leslie Robinson, and she works with me. And she has been honestly, I swear, you have heroes in your business. She has been my absolute hero. She's recovering from serious illness, has just come back, and she ran her office single-handedly. But the amount of business she's created through lockdown has been staggering, and it really, really illustrated the whole point about state of mind. You know, the way you approach these things, you'll get out of it what you put into it, all that type of thing. She has just been unbelievable, and I think again just shows what people can achieve when they put their mind to it.
We salute you, Simon. How about you?
Right, I'm going to give a political answer here. Firstly, it's the 12th of May today, so it's National Nurses Day. So hero is nurses. and my wife, who is a psychiatric nurse. It's where we met. I don't think I've got an individual. I would say that our team of managers, because they have really, they're doing 7 days a week. They're working all the time.
What?
Yeah.
Just pick on one of them, Simon. Simon, just pick on one of them. All right, single one out for once, for God's sake. Stop sitting on the fence. They're not all good. You know they're not.
Stop it. They are. And I'll tell you who else is Mr. Whaley himself and your good self, David, because you've kept me very entertained during this period. You've done some brilliant podcasts with some great people, and I've written them down. The ones Jerry Lyons I thought was brilliant, and some of the information and advice.
Yeah, he is good, Jerry.
I actually think of all of them, 90's been giving us great information, but the one I was most impressed with, from my point of view, was Paul Gilchrist. And I actually sent you a message about that, and I think he's been phenomenal.
Yeah, Peter Gilchrist. So Peter, really, he's a great. I think we're going to hear a lot more from him. Actually, I think he deserves a lot more airtime. And thank you very much for your kind words there, Simon. That's very nice to hear.
Ryan,
enjoyed it as much as you can.
I'm going to probably say my dad, to be honest with you. We lost my mum about 6 months ago. So he's all on his own at home. Can't see anyone. He owns a corner shop, and he's still in there every single day, having to serve people.
Wow.
And just getting on with it. And, being all on his own has got to be tough at the moment. And, he just plods along and just gets on with it. So
Ryan, I mean, you said before that you can't see your dad. Can you not just go into his corner shop and buy some milk and a paper?
Too expensive. It's too expensive.
Sorry? Too expensive.
He won't thank you for saying that.
The queue outside KFC next door runs past the door.
There was a traffic jam last night over here in Manchester. They were queuing up to get into the KFC drive-through.
0 out of 10.
That shop, honestly, the queue is literally 100 yards long.
We deserve a 0 out of 10 as a country. We're bad people.
I tell you what, it mocks all this 66 days, and we're all going to have all of these new things that we're going to be sticking with. Yeah. We've been in lockdown. We don't want change, and as soon as KFC opens, we're all going to go and get fat again.
Can you imagine what happens when Greg's is back? Guys,
gentlemen, thank you.
You've been absolutely fantastic as ever. I didn't have to show any photos to lure you on here. So brilliant for giving your time up, and we'll hope to catch up with you soon. And there you are, Mark Bevan. Well done, guys. Great podcast. It's a webinar, Mark, but never mind. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Well done. Bye-bye.
See you later.
Bye-bye.